Good morning. Today we look at Mark chapter 12, verses 1 through 27. This is the time now. What we're reading in Mark is that during Holy Week, I've mentioned that several times. These are the last few days that Jesus is ministering, is teaching. The Pharisees and the scribes continue to try to dig up dirt on Jesus, and that happens definitely today as well in what we read. First thing, he teaches in a parable, Jesus does, and we're familiar with this parable, of a man planting a vineyard and putting a fence around it, providing, security for the vines and someone there to take care of them. He hires it, he leases it to tenants, and he goes to another country, and the vineyard flourishes. And it says, when the season comes, he sends a slave to the tenants to collect from them his share. And, it's not so common anymore now to share crop. If you are farming and, renting land, farming someone else's land or having someone else farm your land, to share crop was quite common for many years, but now it's more cash rent that way all the time. But the owner had a right to a share of the crop, and that's still the land rent works out that way too. It's the owner's share or whichever. But he sent a slave to collect this, and these tenants, they're crooks. They don't want to pay. They want to have it all. They don't want to acknowledge that, someone else owns the land and has a right. The landowner has a right to his share. And that's a given. But it says this first slave, they seize him and beat him and send him away empty-handed. And then he sends another and another. And he says again, he sent another slave, and they beat one over the head and insulted him. He sent another one. They killed that one. So this is at least 3 they've sent. And so it was with many others. I mean, this landowner was, giving them the opportunity to come clean, to pay what was due, what was right. And they chose just to mistreat his slaves and to kill them. And then finally, he sends his son, and they kill the son as well, thinking this way, he's the heir, we've got it. And they just, they understand that Jesus is telling this parable against the scribes and Pharisees. I mean, this is who he's talking to. And and that's what it says. He said they realized he had told this parable against them, and they wanted to arrest him. But Jesus, this parable that Jesus is just using here is talking about, God is the landowner. He's the one that, put the vineyard. He planted the seed in the people, and he continued to send prophets. These were his slaves, his people. Continued to send them, and the people ignored them, refused them, killed them, just mistreated them all. And then he sent his son. And Jesus is referring to himself and knowing that he's going to be put to death, in just a few days. And, they understood this, but it says they wanted to arrest him, but they feared to do that because of the crowd around Jesus. The people who were clamoring for Jesus, they were all in his court. They had just Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest, praises, glory to the Lord, with just a couple of days ago. And it's just, the words that he spoke against them, just upset them more. But, they could not see. They couldn't come to change themselves that way. And so the next thing it says, then they sent to him some Pharisees and Herodians to trap him. And so this group of, maybe the leaders of the Pharisees that he had spoken his parable against, send some others, Pharisees and Herodians. And I've commented before on the Herodians, that they're not the Herodians and the Pharisees didn't always see eye to eye, because the Herodians supported the Roman government. They were in Herod's court. That's why they were called Herodians. But they come with this question of, is it right to pay taxes? And the answer that Jesus gives, he catches them. He says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. And I use this, for myself as a message that we are to be the best citizen of the country in which we live. We are to support our government, to support what's going on the very best that we can, even though we may not agree with everything, and that's, that many of us are in disagreement with different things that way, but yet we are to support our government and to try to work together for the good of all. And all the backstabbing and stuff really doesn't do any good. We all know that. But Jesus catches them in this. He says, well, show me a coin. And of course, the coins all had, the picture of the emperor on them. And when the next emperor would come, the new coins would have a picture of a different emperor. And think about our coins today. They have pictures of presidents, of important people on them, whether it's coins or dollar bills or whatever it may be. So it's people that are honored and recognized as having served the country. And so Jesus says, it's got the picture of Caesar on it. It belongs to Caesar. But what is it really that belongs to God? You think about that. What do we have that belongs to God? Is there anything that doesn't? That's maybe a better question too, but it's hard that way. And it's just like, to give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. It's difficult often to figure out, just what should we give to God, and how do we give to God, and all of those things come into play. But again, those are personal decisions, what we give to God. But what we give to Caesar often is dictated. We go to the grocery store or we go to any place, and there's sales tax, and there's city tax, and there's, we're paying taxes on everything. And, if I was to go into the grocery store and say, I don't want to pay the sales tax on this, they're not going to take it off. It's the law of the land, and we follow the law of the land, even though we may not really agree with it. And we go to another bigger city where they have a city tax, and don't even have to go to a bigger city for that, but, we pay that. It's there. It's a part of who we are. And they have their ways of getting their due in so many ways. But Jesus, doesn't get caught in the trap of saying, well, no, you can't support the government. He doesn't say that at all. He says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's. And that's, again, as I said, the hard part of what is it that we give to God, And then after that, some Sadducees, and Mark tells us who don't believe in the resurrection. It's such a stupid question coming from the Sadducees who don't believe in the resurrection. They ask a question about the resurrection, and it's just, so often we do that too. We ask a silly question, or we ask a question that we already know the answer to, maybe. But they ask this question, and they, it's legitimate in some ways. If a man dies after they marry, and the man dies, no children, it's the responsibility of the brother, and this was custom. And, so 7 brothers, and they all, well, in the resurrection, whose wife is she? And, Jesus doesn't say, well, the first husband or second, he points out that the resurrection is different. That when, we're living here on this earth is one thing, but the resurrection, he says, is different. And one of the notes I have written in my Bible in this part is that Jesus is a man of integrity. And we know that. And integrity is a word that we don't use quite maybe so often today to talk about a man's integrity, but, or a man or a woman, just a person's integrity. But Jesus remained true to himself and he remained true to God. And, you know, he just didn't get caught up in all the pettiness of everything that was going on. I mean, so many ways we want to know what heaven is like. And so the Sadducees' question of whose wife this woman will be is understandable. But the reality is that, you know, we don't know what heaven is like, and we won't know until we get there. And when we get there, we're going to be surprised at so many different things. But the last thing we read today, the last verse, he is the God, not of the dead, but of the living. And he says, you know, he's the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Moses, the God of Jacob. He doesn't name all of those, but, you know, he's the God of the living. And it's another one of those promises to us, reassurances to us, that there is resurrection from the dead to new life. And this new life in heaven that we don't know what to exactly expect will be good, for sure. It'll be good.